Okay. Greetings, everyone. This is Payment Lorenzo, your host of the Leaders Water podcast. Today, I have a repeat, one of my new very best friends I met through the podcast recently, Mr. Mischa Z from cold California. now, no. We had a beautiful conversation about a week or so ago, and it was absolutely phenomenal. This gentleman has gone through hell and back, and now is using those beautiful gifts to inspire others, be an inspiration for everyone around them. A little bit about him. Mischa is the host of the Influence Army podcast, which has over 650 episodes. And I thought I was a big shot with 291. This guy completely dwarfs me. And I'm saying, wow, salute to you. You're an inspiration. Looking up to you. And count 650 episodes and counting. He is the CEO and Chief Influence Officer of the Influence Army membership, where he teaches online entrepreneurs how to go on an influence tour so that they can increase their impact, their authority, and their income, which is exactly the last line, exactly my motto as well. So this is why we're so in line on the same page that I told him, listen, we have an opportunity to co-create magic together, and we'll do that. But today it's all for part two. Part one, we talked about his background, his story, and what a story. Just to recap, at the age of 17, he lost his girlfriend in a car accident. And if that wasn't enough, divorce and all kind of other things. So this guy is a true survivor at the truest form of the meaning of the word. And we spent the first episode was over an hour and a half or so. Absolutely beautiful heart-to-heart conversation, the type I love to have on this podcast. And today we're going to dive deeper into what he's doing, his impact, how is helping all these clients to increase their impact, authority, and income. But before all of that, first of all, welcome back to the show, brother.
Thank you so much, Payman. It is so good to be back. I'm from cold California. Actually, it's going to get down to maybe it'll get down to 56 degrees tonight. That's Fahrenheit, so I won't.
Probably
I
like
don't know what that is Celsius.
10 degrees. Yeah, it's cold. It is cold. Yes, it is cold. So make sure you're bundled up. You're all warmed up. You're good. I have my cup of coffee here. Warm cup of coffee. Warms you up.
Yeah.
Coffee.
It's snowing already. It's snowing somewhere in the world. I know that. So it's not that cold where it's snowing. So
in Canada has been snowing since a month ago when I called back home.
wow.
Our Thanksgiving, the second weekend of October. It was already, they told me that, hey, we already have the heater on in early October. I said, what? Okay. And I was calling them from the beach and I felt so bad for them, But anyways, yeah.
Okay.
First of all, how are you doing today, brother?
I am doing amazing today. I spoke on a podcast earlier, guest spoke on a podcast earlier. I'm forgetting the name right now. And it went great. It was so good. Opportunity to serve and tell good stories. And the host asked such great questions. We had a ton of fun. And then I've been doing a new round of invites or guest requests to speak on some other podcasts, and I got a confirmation and a booking today for next week. So super excited about that. And then speaking on a podcast with you right now. And so that's just a ton of fun, man. Love podcasting myself. Obviously, I have 650 plus. It's like 670 something. I love speaking and sharing the message and just connecting and all that. So I'm having a great day to answer your question.
Beautiful. Speaking of podcasting, why podcasting? How did you end up in the world of podcasting of all the things out there?
Of all the things out there, boy, that's a great question. I had retired in 2015, 16, somewhere from my sales career of being a home loan officer where I was super successful. I ended up doing a team and we ended up funding about $1.5 billion plus home loans. And that's a lot of home loans, right? And I did it by telemarketing, school telemarketing. I did it by direct mailers, sifting through data, doing all that kind of stuff. Just was really that divorce relationships. I needed to retire and be a stay-at-home dad. And then, a few years ago, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, once my boys were leaving the nest, my two boys who are now 22 and 20, it was to jump back into the entrepreneur space, right? And I've always, not always, but I want to bring everything I know into the online marketing world. And so I joined this high-end coaching group. It's called the 2CCX. It's with Russell Brunson. This is
Oh,
about
yes.
3 years ago. Yeah, Russell Brunson, loves Russell Brunson,
Same here.
yeah. And he said, all right, you get to either start a podcast, start a blog, or start a YouTube channel. And I just picked podcasting. And people are like, you have a certain look, this and that. You should be on YouTube. You should be on YouTube. And for whatever reason, I just went with podcasting, and
Mm.
I'm so glad I did. Yeah, does that answer the question? To
Oh,
start building
beautiful.
a base in
Beautiful.
my marketing, online marketing career. And yeah.
So from the moment you started a podcast, when did you realize that podcasting can be a serious rival business and you really started to take it seriously, not just as a hobby? Was it straight from
Yeah,
the
so
get
that's
go or?
another. Yeah, no, straight from the get-go, I started to do it like I started in the online marketing space, like I said, 4 years ago. I actually started my podcast 3 years ago in November. So
Mm.
November of 2001 was when I started my podcast. Um, but I did it yeah, to be foundational for my fledgling entrepreneurial growth, for that new business, for my base, right? And I think to directly answer your question, I got after it right from the start, was podcasting like mad, obviously. And it took me a while to get traction, right? It took me
Sure.
a while to get traction, and it was a labor, it's been a labor of love,
Hmm.
right? Uh, and so some people like you, I know for you, you were able to leverage your podcast for financial success out of the gate, I think, or pretty quickly, right? If I remember from our
No, it took
conversations.
me a year. For the first year, I didn't make a penny because I had no idea how to monetize it. Because, I thought monetize a podcast, you have to build a massive audience and then make your money through sponsorships, ad spend, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
I just stumbled upon a way to monetize it even with my little less than 200 subscribers. But no, at first I had absolutely no clue.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think, yeah, yeah. So I think your question was, did it start out as a hobby or did it start out
Yes.
as a business? Yes, it
Mhm.
started out as a business for me.
Mhm.
To answer that question, yeah. And I think but go on, I'll let you ask another question before I
Sure,
start
sure, sure. So you said
moving.
you started a podcast right away for business. When did you really realize that, hey, this is this is legit. There's a tremendous potential in this. That it really caught your attention.
Yeah,
Say, hey, I need to go. Even though you started off as a business venture with this, when did you realize, hey, I need to go all in with this and really immerse myself and learn anything I need to learn on this to really crush it?
yeah. So, my uh, the Influence Army podcast is V3 of my podcast. I'm right in the middle of a rebranding, right? So when I just kept
Wow.
the same podcast RSS, I just rebranded it, right? Some people tell you to scrap the old podcast, start a new. Some people will say just rebrand. To me, uh, I just find that rebranding is just fine for any podcasters out there. Just change the name, change the cover art, and keep charging forward. Let people know, obviously.
Mm.
But my podcast originally called Bitch Slap: The Accelerated Path to Peace. And
Wow.
you know how the universe gives you like bitch slap. Sorry to swear. But it's like oftentimes this gives us that smack on the side of the head and says, "Hey, man, you gotta change your ways," right?
Mm.
Or things that are perceived bad that happen to us are actually catalysts, springboard for profound change, right? I started my podcast. I went on that idea. So I was interviewing people, been through so much, and we talked about this in the previous episode, right? Divorce, relationships. My girlfriend died in that car accident when, when we were 17. And just the ups and downs of life. And so I was so interested in people's stories of of redemption almost, right? And so I started interviewing people about that. And I thought I was going to be in more of a healing modality business,
Mm.
right? Where, because I was teaching yoga and doing all these, I still love yoga. I don't do yoga anymore, but I thought, oh, maybe I will teach, inspire people more of like, who's the guy's name? Like Eckhart Tolle, something like
Mm-hmm.
that, or
Yeah.
Marianne Williamson, or something like that, right? And so um, started learning about those really cool healing modalities, and you know, uh, ended up doing a summit called the Tools for a Good Life Summit. I believe you can go to toolsforgoodlifesummit.com. Not sure if it's live or not, doesn't matter. But I interviewed 20 people, and there was like, I interviewed tapping people, interviewed, you know, uh, like meditation masters, like legit Indian Sikhs. You know what I mean? I interviewed all these amazing different people from all across these modalities, and I realized that I love sales marketing. I love it, and I have a rich history of it for my whole life through 20 years of sales, of telemarketing, door to door, flyers, of building those systems, and follow up and scripting, and writing scripts to stick to help you, sell more, sell better, get your message across, sheets, all kind of stuff. And I was like, I just had an epiphany one day where I was like, oh gosh, like I can serve better by teaching people how to get the message out there, right?
Mm.
Like that's a better way for me to teaching somebody how to meditate, if you want to think of it that way. And so I changed my podcast name to The Table Rush Talk. This is probably a year and a half ago, somewhere in there. Year and a half ago, I switched. Um, Lost a lot of followers because I went more from pretty much straight up like meditation or mindfulness type of conversations to, more entrepreneurial, but still laced with mindfulness and the universe and God, and and heart center, like bringing all those modalities into entrepreneurship. Um, this is a very long-winded answer to your question, a kind of a sideways thing, but it's been almost a tool for me to find my voice, to
Mm.
talk about what I like. I went from being retired, getting my boys through school and being out here, to the world's my oyster. I can talk about whatever I want, starting my podcast and slowly but surely narrowing down to where I am today, the influence army. And somewhere in there, somewhere in sort of the last year, I realized the power in using the podcast for me to find my voice, to test material, to start telling stories. Like it's an endpoint for me, for the stories I want to tell, right? And
Mhm.
then I get to voice them, I get to put them out there to the world, and I get to I'll start refining them and using them uh, as a tool for marketing and sales. Did I answer
Yes,
the question at
beautiful,
all? Or
beautiful.
yeah,
So when you started your podcast, did you have a specific idea of who you're gonna be interviewing? Did you have a your ideal avatar right off the bat, or that's something that evolved and you got a better idea as you kept on going?
such a great question. It was super wide and
Mm,
broad, and I had no idea. I hated it when people said, "What? Who's your avatar?" It's
yeah,
like, X. I don't know.
anyone with a pulse, you know. Same for me.
And
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
so we're
Beautiful.
talking about avatar. Yes, our avatars, right? So my avatar was everyone, right? And then that's what it felt like. It was I hated it when people would ask me the
Mm,
question of who's your avatar, who's your perfect customer, ultimately, although I didn't know it at the time or I didn't want to admit it because I was still kind of raw in that space myself, was it was, you know, middle-aged people, mostly men who were going through that midlife crisis, right? Maybe there was divorce, career failure, family death. Like I happen to have all that stuff, and so I was speaking to that person, women as well, um, and but I didn't want to admit that, right? And so what was I going to say there? I love the idea, niche down and the fringes will follow, right?
totally.
And so we don't need to be scared of picking that avatar. Today, heart-centered entrepreneurs, man, I'm all about the heart-centered entrepreneur. Those of us who are really, really tapping into that heart center and moving from a place of service, purpose, mission. And the person doesn't even need to know that they're a heart-centered entrepreneur per se. They're just moving that way. That makes sense.
Totally. So we have quite a few things in common. You started your podcast in November 2020. I started mine just at the end of October 2020. You know, plus what you mentioned at first, the avatar thing, same thing for me. I had absolutely no idea. I wanted to interview anyone with a pulse, as long as they have a powerful story, you know,
Yes.
and before you know it, things evolve and you get to have a better idea and all that of where do you want to take the podcast. When I first started my podcast, I wanted to build a an audience because I was about to launch a Kickstarter, a Kickstarter for a product I wanted to do. But then because it was, at the start of the pandemic, the world was completely shut down. I couldn't find anyone to make the product. It wasn't meant. It was not going to happen. So I said, you know what? Let's put that on the shelf. But I was still enjoying talking to people, having beautiful
Yeah.
conversations, And so you, Mischa, when did you start uh monetizing your podcast? When you first started your podcast, did you have a game plan on how to monetize your podcast? Did you know, or is it something that you learned along the way? And if yes, how long did
Mm.
it take you before you started monetizing your podcast?
Yeah. So I would tell you that I don't monetize my podcast directly,
Mm,
right? Some people are like very, very strategic with it, right? So it's like you said earlier, build that audience, sell the ads, uh, you know, uh, do that, right? You like build a massive following base, a follower base, subscribers, all those things, downloads, right?
mhm.
Um, or you get more strategic with it, where like you're like, hey, I'm gonna strategically uh interview people, and then we will have opportunities to work together, most likely, right? And over time, that's the model that I've shifted to that you're talking about right there. But but I use it more as a way to get my voice out, to interview people, to start up relationships. Um, and I'm very detached, and this might not be the answer you want
I
or
love
that
it.
people like to hear. I'm very detached from the metrics of the whole thing, right? I'm just like, it's such a powerful way
Mm-hmm.
to find your voice and to talk ideas and to do these things. The other thing that I've found is it's incredibly it's the what's the word when someone sees your body of work and they go, oh yeah, that's uh uh um it like proof. It's like proof of what's the word I'm talking about? I can't believe I can't remember it
Wait,
right now.
I know what you mean. It gives you credibility. It gives you more. It makes you more legitimacy. So
Yeah, right. And so what I have found is that
social proof.
people,
That's the word. Social
so,
proof.
yeah, yeah, social proof or yeah, cachet or things like that where right where people go, what do you do? And I go, oh, I've got a podcast, and they look at my podcast and they go, oh my gosh, like you have 600 and whatever episodes. Oh, you have all these great reviews. It's like credibility. They're like they don't even need to listen to it, right? So I just find that just like proof, it's proof, it's social proof for what I do, and it's amazing, right? It's like having 1 million followers on Instagram, right? Where I look at someone and I go, oh my God, they got 1 million followers on Instagram. They're up to something cool. But I don't even follow them, like them, look them, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's clout. What's another word we could use? So,
Oh
you
yes.
know, I think, of course, I get leads from it, things like that happen from it, but I love it more for just expression of my voice, thoughts, and ideas. And then obviously interviewing amazing people. I'm really just ramping up the interviewing of people again. I had stepped away from that for a little bit, but I love it. But now I'm going to get back at it. So, and I'll say this, and then I'll let you ask your next question. You see people that are super successful out there. Like there's this guy, Colin Boyd. Okay. And he's got a great podcast. I would recommend it to anybody. Colin Boyd. I can't remember what it's called right now, but it's maybe you look it up for me.
I'll
Colin
look.
Boyd has an amazing podcast, but he was super successful before he started his podcast. Okay. And so he had a big audience. He had a big email list. He was very successful at teaching people how to do webinars. He
Okay.
is there it is, the expert edge. Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great listen. The guy just brings so much value.
Subscribing to it. Thank you.
But
Okay.
yeah, but what he did, so for example, is someone like him that's already established, has an audience, has an email list, is a professional coach, is like already making millions of dollars with his business. He was able to start up his podcast and bring uh like very strategically, right? Which is awesome. So you see people who are like movie stars. They're like, I'm going to start a podcast, and they can be strategic with it and monetize right away because they're already bringing an audience. They're already bringing a message. They're already bringing I don't want to say something to the table, but they're able to leverage it in a very specific way with an audience that they already have, and then
Mm,
that begets more audience, right?
sure.
um or brings more audience. And so I think that that's kind of the way that podcasts are presented to us as podcasters, right? We see successful, like Joe Rogan's been doing it forever. He was first in the game, bleeding edge, and Joe Rogan's amazing. You can disagree or like or not like his content, but the dude is smart. He's funny. He's compelling, and he's a master of the craft. And he's been doing it for a long time, right? So you see a lot of people that have been doing it for a long time, right? People who are new to the game, it's hard to gain traction. And if you where I'm sort of ranting right now, but I think there's this illusion that start a podcast and you can monetize it. Bam. I love what you do because I know we're not here to talk about you, but you're like, hey, you can literally teach somebody to start a podcast, leverage the interview process to create a stream of income very quick, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. Me, I'm like, it's a voice thing for me.
Oh, me
There
too.
you go.
Initially,
That's a long ass answer.
as they say, the gold is in the ramble.
Yeah,
It's so true. Because
yeah,
I have to say, when I'm asked a question, I go all around and I come up with a 5-minute answer. Say, wait, what was the question again?
yeah. Which usually means I don't know, or I want to sidestep the actual answer, you
Yeah.
know. But
No,
I go ahead.
no, you're absolutely right. It's all about the voice. For me, when I started, one of the greatest life-changing benefit of podcasting has been for me to find my voice. Forget about the
Yeah,
finance roles and all that. It's or the connections. For me, it was finding my voice. Stop chasing, the next shiny object, or jumping from one
yes,
opportunity to another. It's been
yes.
finding my voice. Oh, and one thing I wanted to ask you, because if you a couple of questions. You, first of all, your podcast when you started, even now, is it mostly audio or video or both?
It's mostly audio. I know that video is very powerful, and I
Huge.
even believe, yeah, what is it? Spotify allows you to do video on it now. I get, yeah, when the time is right, I'll go to that. I think that you didn't ask me this, but I'm just going to say it, right?
Please.
It's like somebody asked me on the interview today, where can I find you on social media? And I'm like, where you can find me is on my podcast. I'm always podcasting, and you can subscribe to my newsletter. And then, then you'll get access a couple times a week to what I'm up to. Like social media, yeah, you can find me there. But as soon as I made that shift to like, I'm all in on podcasting, and that's my base.
Mm,
The Everything changed, right? I'm like, I'm not chasing the social media. I mean, it's a very powerful tool. And if you have a
sure.
team and you can leverage it and all this, but it's like, you want to know what I'm up to? Look at my podcast, and someone can look at my podcast, right? And
Sure.
then they're like, oh, cool. I see you're up to something and you're consistent and you
Yeah.
got a message, and there's so many shiny objects out there to chase. And
Oh yeah.
I think in hindsight, in 5 years, one day at a time, as I continued to have success, but like, darn it, I should have been posting my content on YouTube at the same time, right? Or I should have been doing all my episodes video style. But I don't trip on it anymore. I'm like, when the time is right, that stuff will
Yes.
happen. Uh yeah. I'll tell you another thing too. You did not ask me this, but I a lot of my journey recently, or of the new journey online, has been dealing with that imposter system and
Oh
syndrome,
yes.
this
That's huge.
imposter system syndrome, right? And so I was a lot more successful with my podcast than I knew or know, and it's still the case. Like, I needed people to point it out to me. Like, I had a couple of friends who we've been in this entrepreneurial journey together, and they're a few steps ahead of me, but they're like, Mischa, like, you are so influential with your podcast. Like you need to come to reality, and you need to realize it and see it. And I was like, I don't know. And just like, and this self-doubt around it. And
Mm,
finally, they told me one more time, and it sunk in, and I was ready to hear it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is true. And I think that that's when I let go of needing to have this social media presence, or these other things. I'm not saying any of that's bad. There's a time for all of that.
of
That
course.
is
Yeah.
great. um I'll say this about social media too. One thing I've learned, I know you didn't ask me this question. I'll give you time to ask me a question again. But I have found that works really well for social media for me is just strike at it for a couple of months, put myself out there, put an offer out there, play around, and then pull back
Mm,
and then come back on there. And people are like, "Where were you? What are you doing? Oh my God, it's so good to see you again." And then pull back and then jump back in again. And that works very well for me. This illusion of needing to be ubiquitous on social media out there all the time is
mm.
absolutely just that, just an illusion. And anyway, I'll stop now. Next
No, it's
question,
beautiful.
please.
I love that. I love that. I love that. So, how would you, everything is a progress, a journey. For example, if you go on my YouTube channel, if you take a look at the first 5, 10 episodes, they're not the best because I had no idea what I was doing. The camera was right on my face. My nose was too big, was too dark. But I leave it on purpose so people can see the journey.
Oh
Was it
my
was it the
gosh,
same for
yes.
you? If you look at your very first few episodes, was it always like not the best sound,
Oh
not
yeah.
the best, lots of especially for you, you said it's mostly audio, so audio it's how would you
Yeah.
talk about the progress, the journey of from the very first episodes to now to what 651 and counting, closing 700, and by next week you'll be at 2000
Yeah.
episodes. So
Yeah. So I want to say first off, I love how you're committed to putting your content on Facebook, number one. Not Facebook, YouTube, number one.
Yeah,
I
YouTube
love
and
that about you.
Facebook,
That's
yes,
like,
yeah, I did, yeah.
yeah, yeah. You're like YouTube number one. It's going there and you're committed to that and it's great. And so perhaps, the posting of the podcast of the interview might be delayed on the actual podcast platform for whatever reason, but like you're on it on YouTube, right?
Mhm.
And so that's cool, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
But yeah, as far as finding my voice and when did I start making sense and all that kind of stuff, and um, when did the ums go less and things like that? Yeah, you know, like it's been fun. I I do a lot of podcast episodes while I'm walking. And so that's one
Wow,
reason I don't do
that's
too much
interesting.
video. Yeah. So yeah, I've got like this. I don't know where the mic is, but I have this really cool mic. It's called the Shure uh,
Yeah, yeah.
MB MB88, and you plug it into your phone. And I'll show you. Hold on one second. And so since I'm always these days walking and recording episodes, I that's why I'm not really so attached to video, although I could be, right? I could be filming myself as I was walking, but so I put
Mm.
the little mic on there, right? And then I can just record my episodes more stream of conscious. Um, but my setup now, like the lighting is good. The mics are good.
Mhm.
Like it's a different
I have a professional setup now. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been fun to watch that grow, right? To where even as I got my first ring light and then I got, a side light over here and then I got another side light over here, and then I got the booms and then,
What was
got
the
a better
first
camera.
what was the first microphone you started with? Do you still have it? I kept mine. I'm gonna keep it as a souvenir. I'm gonna frame it because that completely changed my life. Do you still have the first
Yeah,
microphone that you started with? That little
this
thing.
is it. I
That
bought this
thing.
microphone. Yeah, I bought it 7, 8, 9 years ago by now. I've lost track. It is so great. And so, yeah, and I just started interviewing people. I started recording everything before I started the podcast.
Mm.
And so when I got ready I had been planning on starting a podcast for a long time. And then, of course, I finally did, but that's the mic. Yeah. And then the next one, I actually have a bunch of mics, but
Yeah, I
uh,
can see that.
the other one, yeah. Where's the one that there's the MV88 Plus, which is the next one I got, which is this, but it's easier to put on stands and things. So
Mm,
I got this, the plus, and then I got this one right here.
very nice. Very nice. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I would still tell you, yeah, you know who my favorite subscriber listener is?
Tell me.
Me.
Because you do it for
I
yourself.
love
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes.
I love listening into my episodes, man. I just feel like I'm like, you know what?
Yes.
How did that one sound? I'll listen to it and I'll be like, you know what? It's usually something I need to hear and remind myself of, or I just am being funny or whatever. So there you go. Anyone listening, you know what? I don't know. I should have started my podcast the first time I thought I should start a podcast. It took me, like I said, I bought this mic and finally got the courage, 5 years later, which was 3 years ago, to finally start my
Wow.
podcast.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Misha, glad you mentioned that because that you enjoy listening to your own podcast. For me, I'm the same. Does it ever happen to you while listening to your podcast, to your episodes, and then you find you catching yourself saying, wait a second, where's that coming from? Did I really say that? Because that happens to me all the time when I listen, for example, our episode, every episode before I release them, I rewatch them. I just to make sure
Yeah.
there's everything is good. And then honestly, I found myself countless times saying, hey, where is that coming from? What did I really say that? It's almost as if the information sometimes comes channeled to me. I would not say some of those things in a normal setting, but sometimes when I speak, they just it just like flows. Does it ever happen to you when you're listening to yourself afterwards?
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I made a commitment right when I started my podcast where I was like, I am publishing every episode I record.
Mm,
I am not going to be self-critical of it. Like I record it with right, and I'm like, if I hit record, I'm publishing it. And there's only one episode that I didn't publish, and I can't remember why now. Currently, I must have been super, super, super raw about something, but right from the start. And this is not really answering your question, but it hit me, and I think it's important to say that is one commitment that I have. I'm like, I'm not going to over edit. I'm not going to overthink it. I record it. It's going up. You know what I mean? And for good or bad. But I usually, to answer your question directly, I'm not like, oh, that was something that came out of nowhere, right? I'm no,
okay.
but I love that idea, right? I, yeah. You know what is so powerful?
Mm,
I'll tell you this is that I like guest speaking, right? And I like speaking from stage. And so it's important to listen to ourselves and hear what habits we have.
mhm,
And can we take out some of the ums, or can we take out some of those things and be better? Or when I talk about finding my voice, I'll start with new stories that I want to tell by recording an episode about it and then listening to it and going, oh yeah, that's a good story, or I need to refine it a little bit. Does that make sense?
yes, yes, yes. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm. So, Misha, tell us more about your business. What are you doing? First of all, what's the name of your podcast again?
Yeah, it's called the Influence Army podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So what am I doing with my business? So I teach people how to go on an influence tour, how to increase their impact, their authority, and their income, by going on an influence tour. And that's guest speaking on podcasts, and then guest speaking on YouTube channels. And then, great, now what partnerships can we develop? What affiliate relationships can we develop? Right. And all of these types of things are so powerful, and they're a great way to leverage other people's audiences and things like that. I've just seen so many people um, throw good money after bad at social media marketing, right? And they're trying to get their message out that way and figure out their marketing that way. And it's people flame out all the time and they run out of money and they give up, right?
Mhm.
And so I was like, oh my gosh, I had this epiphany. I was like, one, people need help learning how to tell their stories, right? So Rick, who's in the Influence Army, my membership, and one of my frameworks is the Story Bank, get your stories together framework, where you start inventorying your stories, right? And you look at the story arcs of your life. So you name the story arcs of your life. So for me, there's like the recovery years, there's the success years, there's that arc, right? The mortgage salesman success years, and then there's the divorce, failed relationships, death years, right? And then I've got four story arcs, and my fourth story arc is the digital marketing years, which is in effect now in the last 3, 4, 5 years. But within those arcs, there's stories, impactful stories. There's your what I have you inventory are your stories, right?
Mhm.
So if we go back to my recovery years, that story of my uh, girlfriend at the time dying in a car accident was a profound time of my life, right? And so I've got that inventoried, and so it's like, all right, when's it an appropriate time to tell that story? Or in in my success years in that story arc, it's like, oh yeah, I was a telemarketer, I was a direct mail person, I door-to-door sales, and I have all kinds of stories around that, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And then we go on to what are our impactful people stories, right? So in the digital marketing years, the now, who are the impactful people stories? Well, I joined Russell Brunson's, high-end coaching group, and he's been very impactful for me, right? So I have stories
Mhm.
around that. Uh, you know, when I did my summit, my first virtual summit, digital marketing, in the digital marketing story arc, and I sent out an invite to Anthony Trucks, and you can Google Anthony Trucks, but he's spoken on some big stages. He's spoken at Funnel Hacking Live, right? And I said, hey, Anthony, love to have you on my summit. And this is right at the beginning. I'd started my podcast. I was going to do this online virtual summit, and I sent an email to Anthony Trucks, and he said, I would love to be on your summit. And I
Wow.
was like, I can do this,
Yes.
right? And so and then there's the our customer stories, right? So like Rick, who's used the story bank, Rick Hayhurst. What's up, Rick? If you happen to listen to this, he's like, oh my gosh, I started inventorying my stories using your story bank framework. And he goes, I am such a better effective speaker now. I know intuitively what stories one to tell. I'm so much more confident in my networking. Um, right. So customer stories, right? And I have
Mhm.
more customer stories, right, that I can tell, that like I teach people how to get on podcasts. And so Dawn Gadden went from, before she was super frustrated. She's like, I'm all over the place with my message, not all over the place with her strategy to get herself out there. She was burned out on putting herself out there on Facebook. She was burned out on, finding another marketing strategy. And she jumped into the influence army, and now she's booked on 6 podcasts next month, right? And she's like, she knows the exact next step to take. She knows what stories to tell. I not sure if I'm answering your
No,
question, but
absolutely. That's
these are
beautiful.
the
This is
things
gold.
that
This is
do.
gold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you come up with
So
that? One thing I noticed about you is that you love the word framework. How do you come up with those? And I mean, with the getting people into an influence store, how did you get into that? How was that an epiphany, or is that something that you went through yourself, or you realized, hey, people are struggling to get into bigger podcasts or podcasts to get their message out?
yeah, great question. Love that question. Thank you for that. So here's exactly what happened. I was out there getting customer testimonials for online entrepreneurs, right? So video testimonials. I had my perfect video testimonial system, my five-step system for getting your customers to gladly do your selling for you. That was like my first product, right? And I was literally getting flown around the world to get testimonials for people, for businesses, flown across the United States. Um, and so uh, I'm doing this, and then I had this friend. His name was Ryan Lipsey, and he's got the Small Business Spotlight. He's got this show called the Small Business Spotlight, and he had been harassing me for I don't know, months. Like, you got to come onto my show because you're teaching people how to get their customer testimonials. And he spoke to realtors. So he's a title officer and he spoke to realtors, and realtors need content, right? And they need video content and they need good video content. And so I have my perfect video testimonial system. And he's like, you got to teach my realtor audience how to get their customers video testimonials, and then how I have this whole method for repurposing it for social media, right? He's like, you got to teach them. And finally, I broke down, was like, okay. And so I went on a show and I killed it. I crushed it. Okay. And I was like, oh my God, I did good. Right. And then I woke up to an email. This is the other thing. So that was the one thing. The other thing was I woke up to an email from a customer. Her name is Stacy Oliver. And Stacy had sent this email to me, and she said, you're the one who moves the needle in my business. I
Wow.
have to have you at, yeah. She's like, you're the one that's responsible for driving revenue in my business. I have to have you at my next event in Aspen, Colorado. Book your airline ticket, send me the invoice, send me your quote. Like, I need you there next week. And I was like, my
Wow.
imposter syndrome evaporated in that moment. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I am adding value. Right.
Big
And so
epiphany
I
here.
was like, yeah, big epiphany. So those two things literally happened like within days of each other. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get my message out there, and I got to get it out there in a big way. And I'm going on a podcast tour. So I was like, I'm going to go on a podcast tour. Right. And so I did this social media post. So I'm a systems guy,
Mm.
right? And so it was like, if I systemize the outreach process, the finding of the podcast to speak on, the replies, I script it all and build this machine, then it would be easy to guest speak on 50 podcasts in 100 days potentially. So I did a post and I was like, hey, anybody out there? And I said, hey, everybody, I'm going to go on this podcast tour. I got to get my message out there. I'm going to create all this stuff, these systems and procedures on how to do it. I said, would anybody want that? And I got this flood of engagement saying yes. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, like, that's my destiny. It's
Mm-hmm.
not this video testimonial thing, which is amazing, right? But it's to help people guest speak on podcasts. So that's it. That's the story. Does that answer your question?
Oh, big time. So you mentioned video testimonial. Was that your business before, helping people get more video testimonials?
Yep. 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 Yep.
That's a good one too.
And yeah, it's a great one. And when I was at this turning point, I was like, what's going to be the easiest one for me to scale? Or what was the one that would be funnest for me to
I was
scale
about
from
to
that
say,
heart center,
I was about to
right?
say, not only the scale, but also that I'm enjoying it big time. Yes, yes,
Enjoying it, right? And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I love interviewing people, right? Obviously, I have a podcast. I've literally interviewed thousands of people,
Sure.
right? So and I've been paid to interview people, and I love it. And one thing I realized was that when I was interviewing entrepreneurs, a lot of them are horrible at telling their customer stories,
Mm-hmm.
right? So inevitably, I had asked that entrepreneur, I'm like, hey, what's your favorite customer story? It like backs up what you do, right? Like now's your chance to show through your customer's eyes how good you are at what you do. And I just found entrepreneur after entrepreneur after entrepreneur, it was like there'd be the pause, but it wasn't for dramatic sake. It was because they literally didn't know or
Mm.
they hadn't put time into it. And so they'd go, oh, I helped this one person and this is what I helped them do. I'm like, well, what's their name? And they're like, well, I don't know if it's okay for me to use it.
Use your first name.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I was like, man, people need help getting their customer stories and people need help telling their customer stories. So that's kind of been my journey. So I was like, oh my God, people need help getting their customer testimonials, man. And I was like, people need to know how to use them, where to use them. Um, there's so many cool ways to get them and all kind of stuff. So you'll notice on my sales page, I have a ton of video testimonials because I'm good at getting them.
That's huge. Beautiful. Well done. Tell us more about the structure of your program.
Yeah. So basically, the structure of the program. So there's two main parts to it. There's the get ready to guest speak part of it, and then there's the go on tour part, right? So the get ready to guest speak part is like, hey, let's get a few things in order. Let's start, you know, one of the first things I have my members do is start their story bank. Doesn't mean it needs to be thorough and filled out completely,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it needs to be, you need to start thinking about it. So I'm constantly adding stories to my story bank. And so what I do is I put it on my notes first in my iPhone. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got a running list. So you can literally see right here stories for the story bank. I've got Steve Burt, make your bed. And uh he was like this first guy in my life that was like, hey, start making your bed. So much good stuff will come from that, right? And I have other stories around that. I've got stories from when I was a commodities broker. I don't tell this much, but when I was it came to me the other day when I was a commodities broker and I was in financial services. People were investing a lot of money through me, right? I was a broker, a commodities broker. So for oil futures, wheat futures, this was
Silver,
V1 of
corn,
me.
and all that. Sugar. Yes, yes, all of those. Yes. Currency,
Exactly.
yes, yes.
Currency. Exactly. Highly speculative. Some of the most highly leveraged speculative markets in the world, right? Which means is you can lose your ass quick and you can lose everything you've got plus some faster than you can blink an eye. So I was constantly telling my customers, this was the first sales job I had, official sales job, like telemarketing. I was bringing in retail commodities clients, people who wanted to speculate in the markets. And part of it was like, hey, look, you need to know these are the riskiest markets in the world. This is Vegas money. This needs to be money that you have to be prepared to lose. 9 out of 10 people who play these markets lose everything. And it's true. And that stat, I'm sure, is still true today. And they'd say, okay, but I'm going to be different. I'd say, okay, come on in.
No, I almost
My
get
point
into
is,
this. Sorry, go ahead, go ahead, sorry,
huh?
go ahead,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
what were you going to say?
Does the
What?
name Ken Roberts ring a bell to you?
Yes, opportunities and options. Was that it? Or I
I
don't know.
signed up for this program way back when I was finishing high school, getting into university. I was really interested, intrigued, but back then I was in high school. I didn't have the money, so I didn't do anything with it. But I learned about how to read the charts and all that. And he was saying this is
Yes.
the most. It was very big into what is it? Silver hog and stuff like that. That sounded like
Yes.
magic to me, but back then I didn't have
Yes.
money, so I didn't do anything with it. But yeah, wow.
Yes. 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 So
Is he
the
still around?
reason I probably I don't know. He can't be. He was an old timer when I started. What 20? What's that? this was in
Back
the
in the late
late.
90s, early 2000, yes.
Yes, exactly. So
I used to
you
get
know,
his charts in the mail, but I haven't seen any ads from him since then.
yeah, I actually went and interviewed with him in where was he in California? He was somewhere like mid coast California, Ventura, California. And anyway, but point
Yeah, yeah.
is that people would lose would well, you got to be good at telling a story there, and you had to frame people right on the way in and say, look, you're probably going to lose your ass. Everybody does. I literally used to tell people, look, if I knew where the markets were going, I would be on a boat in the Bahamas. I wouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind, right? Just because it was like those markets are brutal and they still are. um most people are tremendously underfunded. But point is, people would lose money. I'd need to call them right away. You couldn't delay, right?
Mm.
It was like, hey, bad news, pick up the phone. Trade was not good. You lost this much money. This is how it is. And say it to the point, detach, and just no delay. And so I bring that habit forward. Like I'm constantly setting proper expectations, and if there's bumpy news, I'm letting you know, and I'm not hiding or running from it. And it served me very well throughout my sales career. So anyway, I just tell you that. So that's a story that I'm like, yeah, I need to refer to that story more. And actually, you resonated with it already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, follow up. I don't like that is serving me so much right now, but like I need to tell people how I learned my follow-up skills, right? Because it served me so good. And I think in the online marketing space, people are like, there's just this magic pill where you're gonna do something and money's gonna rain down. It's like, no, man, you develop an opportunity, you're probably gonna have to follow up,
Big
right?
time.
To a certain extent. And that could be with email sequences, with literal live phone calls, with whatever. And actually, we were just talking about this story right now. When I was going to launch my membership, it was
Mm.
either going to be on podcast speaking or testimonials. I was like,
Mm.
what? And I was like, God, like, what is it? What should I do? And the answer came very clear: help people freaking get their message out through an influence tour. You're good at that. That's what you know how to do, and it's your gift. So go for it. And I was like, yes, okay. But anyway, so I encourage people to constantly be documenting their stories
Mm-hmm.
and then the success points along the way. And then it's like, okay, great. Now let's put some content out to your existing audience, letting them know that you're going to go on a podcast tour. I call it a soft launch. And then you'll generate a lot of podcast opportunities super quick. And then it's about refining your message. I'm also big on the call to action. So many people fail at the call to action. Like if right now you could say, hey, Misha, where can people find more information about this amazing podcast tour or this
Yes.
influence tour? You could say, go to badzuck.com and you could actually join now, or go to guestingguide.com and you can download all the questions you've got about it's a PDF, it's a guide, guestingguide.com, how to launch and run a profitable podcast tour.
Mm.
If you happen to be going there right now. So stuff like that, right? And then it's like, great, now here's how you find the podcasts more than you know what to do with. Great. Now let's start sending out invites, and great. Get your call to action in line. Great. Frameworks, right? Frameworks. You said you seem to love frameworks. So many of us online entrepreneurs actually don't have something to sell. And
Mm.
it's like, it's the frameworks that we have. Frameworks. You can call it a system. You can call it a process, solution, model, method, right? Where my perfect video testimonial system, my 5-step system for
Or
getting your customer to gladly do your selling for you.
a
People are like,
blueprint. Yeah.
yeah, right. And it's like, and people will say, well, customer specific. And I'm like, you know what? I actually have it's funny. I have the, I have, I'm always putting my frameworks on note cards. I
Mm,
don't know why. It's funny. It's an old school habit, but the borrow my framework is my two-step framework to instantly name and systemize your process so you can easily bring it to an audience and give them a reason to buy from you,
mm,
right? And so I can literally, somebody could go, it's one of my gifts that I have actually is I could talk to you, you could be like, what's this? What do you mean? Like, what I do is customer specific, or what I do is I can't think of a name for it, or I don't really know what I do. In 10 minutes, like we'll have a name for your framework, we'll have the 5 steps, we'll have it dialed in, and you can be
mm.
talking about your framework or your system process method, right? Those are things that I teach.
Beautiful, beautiful. Um, so when someone joins your influence army, how
Yeah,
soon can they expect to get some real concrete results?
within the first month, absolutely,
Okay.
no problem. Yeah,
So within the first month, you show them how to find the podcasts that are relevant to them, and then send the invitation, because I seen one of your emails and I was blown away by the content. Say, wow, this is gold. Usually I don't read
yeah,
emails. I don't reply to emails because I have like my inbox is like 20,000 unread emails. Just one. I have like over 100,000 across all my email accounts. But this one, I saw your name. So okay, yeah, this guy. Okay, let me open it. I read it. It's wow, and I was compelled to reply. Say, yo, brother, this is gold.
yeah,
And I've been in podcasting for a long time, but I said, wow, this is genius.
yeah.
So share with us an example of the most remarkable transformation you've seen from one of your clients.
I love it. So I can give you 3 examples.
Sure.
Don Gadden started and really quick, like she's already got 6 podcasts. It's actually into this month, November, but she gave me a video testimonial just the other day and she's like, oh my gosh, like this has been amazing. Like I'm on so many podcasts and I've got 6 booked for next month, right? That's exciting. Speaking on 6 podcasts, and she wasn't even into the month yet, so she's probably booking more. So that's super powerful. I've got Stacy who said you're the one who drives the revenue in my business. She joined the
That's
influence army.
huge. Yeah.
Yep, and she locked down within 2 weeks. She locked down a $6,000 deal,
Wow.
like got a check for $6,000 within 2 weeks of joining. I think it was. She's got another one. That's like directly result where she's like, I did this and got $6,000. I did this and it just happened again. And I got $6,000. Right. And those are just 2 small little
Mm,
examples within what she's doing. And so think of all the other stuff that's happening. Carissa, Carissa might be my favorite, but
mm,
she goes, she's like, basically what I have you do is nail down your avatar. And I'm like, just commit to something and it can be wrong. Right? Just like pick something for me, right? And then and then a little bit of story bank work. And she got on a virtual stage, right? And and talked directly to that avatar. I have this framework that like you pick out your framework, your avatar, and then a couple of stories. And she secured a $30,000 package. And she
oh,
like she 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 called me, and I wished I was recording at that time, but she called me and she's like, "You're not gonna believe this." I I have another testimonial that I got from her, but she was tired and but she's like, "Oh my god, this is a great story." But in the moment, she's like, "Oh my god, you're not gonna believe what happened." And she literally said, "I spoke to my avatar. I spoke about about their pains. I have this I can't remember what it's called right now. One of my frameworks. That's why I write them on cards, because I've been cranking out so many frameworks.
Mm,
Oh, it's the call out your audience headline. That was one of them. So you call out your audience, and then there's the it doesn't matter. She hold on one second. Where is it? It's the oh, feelings, thoughts, actions, bridge statement framework,
mm,
which basically you talk about someone's before state and after state, and then
mm,
which I learned from Stu McLaren, who's amazing. Um, but Stu, I took this idea he had, tweaked it a little bit to fit with me, and basically you're the bridge. It's obvious that you're the solution. This is your pain state. Like, call out your audience. This is your current pain state, and this is your future state. And they're like, oh my God, Mischa's the bridge, right? So Carissa got on stage, was like, here's my audience, here's their before state, here's their after state, but in her own words, right? And this person was like, oh my God, you are speaking directly to me. Here's this $30,000 package. Um, but there you go. So it's that kind of stuff. No guarantees. Anybody watching this, no guarantees. Like, you got to be willing to do the work. You got to be willing to put
absolutely.
yourself out there. You got to be willing to, to test and try. And,
Yeah.
but then there's so many little micro wins for, like I was telling you earlier about Rick, who's just like, he's so much more confident in his storytelling. Right.
That's huge. Yes.
And yeah, and then the framework thing, he's like leveraged that. He's like, oh my God, it changed his life. He literally is like, that is just, he's like, duh. And he's super successful at what he does. So it was like, this isn't like a new guy. This was like, it changed the way he went from a 72-step process to help his customer, which is just outlandish, right? You can't tell someone I've got a 72-step
Wow.
process for
I'll say, see you. Thank you very much.
so he was able to clean it up and make it sexy, and
Yeah.
I don't know. There you go. I could go on, but thank you. Did I answer your question?
Yes. Yes. Beautifully. And some more. How are you getting your clients?
Oh yeah, that's a great question too. So, so what I do now is I guess speak on podcasts and talk about my guesting guide, or I talk about badzuck.com, or I get referred people, lots of referrals. I know one of our conversations, I don't know if we were interviewing each other or just having a friendly conversation, but you're like, I love networking events. Payment, I love networking events. And so I love going to networking events. And usually, if it's not somebody getting direct business from the networking event, it's someone there referring somebody to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it all. I love it all. And
Are you
then,
going to BNI events?
not yet, but I was thinking about it. I was like, maybe I'll
Should.
jump into some BNI stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone like
Yeah.
you would be a no-brainer, especially helping those professionals, say accountants, realtors, doctors,
Yeah.
designers, whatever, any professions,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So,
beautiful.
yeah. And I'm really gaining some good momentum. So super exciting right now. Yeah.
So let me ask you the big question. The big question
Mhm.
is podcasting worth it still in 2023 and beyond for someone that just considering it and said, oh, maybe I'm too late. Maybe, yeah, it's not for me. What would you say to that person?
I would say, tell that part of your brain that's asking your questions to shut up and
To shut
start
the
your
front door?
podcast. Shut the front door and start your podcast. Like,
Yeah,
you will be a better, like, I've done 600 and some episodes. I've interviewed hundreds of people. It's catapulted me to a lot of the stuff we've talked about were a direct result of me doing the podcast,
sure.
right? Now I can get in front of a camera anywhere at any time and talk about what I do. I'm comfortable in front of a mic. Um, like, are you kidding me?
Sure.
I think there's so much noise in the podcasting land that once you get a little bit of legs, it's easy to start to differentiate yourself. people are, turns out, are not very good at marketing their podcasts organically. So I think that there's a ton of opportunity for people who are willing to try some guerrilla tactics, some organic marketing tactics. Yeah, I think they're still grow. I'd say even if it's peaked, man, like, yeah. Did that answer the question?
Yes, yes. You know, I saw a chart 2 years ago that said
Yeah,
the podcasting is about to double in the US by 2023, and 2024 is going to double again and double
yeah.
and double and double. And I
I
see it.
believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's such a great outlet, a creative outlet. It's done
Mm,
so much for me. Like, that's
yeah.
why when people ask, like, how's the monetization of it? And I'm like, well, it's led to this amazing things that I do. It all started with like being willing to put myself out there on an audio platform and start reaching out to people to interview them, and it's led to amazing things for me. So,
What would you say has been the number one transformational benefit of podcasting, and not just your business, but in your life?
uh, from podcasting,
Yes.
is that what you? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Boy, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Um, yeah, I was walking I was walking down the beach the other day. I was walking down the 101, which is a freeway, which is a road right along the Pacific Ocean. So it's literally you're walking on the walking path on the 101, and there's the Pacific Ocean. You can see the waves. You can right, you can see the surfers, right? Beautiful beachy day in San Diego. And this jogging lady she's running really fast, and she stops and she looks at me with these wild eyes and she goes, "You've got that podcast, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And she goes, "I freaking love you." And then just started tearing down the road again. And I was like,
Really?
yeah. I was
Wow.
like, what?
What's your
I
name?
went
You
to,
want to be on my podcast?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I went to Funnel Hacking Live,
Yeah.
and this is a couple years ago. And I have a reputation as a podcaster because I'm consistent and I do it a lot. I walk into Funnel Hacking Live, and my reputation had preceded me. And I say this non-egoically as I can,
Mm,
where it was like people were like, "You've got that podcast, you've got that podcast, you've got that podcast. Oh my God, you're a podcaster. Oh my God." And it's like I said, people hadn't even heard it or didn't even know the name of it. They just knew that I was a podcaster, right? And I had this credibility. It was crazy. Like people like it was crazy. I don't know. So that's not really answering your question, but it's
oh, it
kind of
is.
transformational. Like that's super fun
That's
stuff,
huge. Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, I will get people that will, like, when you responded to my email and said, "This is gold, brother."
Mm,
I was like, "Oh my gosh, like thank you."
yeah.
You know, it's so affirming, and it lets me know that I'm walking the right path and I'm serving in the way I want to serve, right? And when you get something like that from someone like you, I know that the ripple effect is greater than I can comprehend, right? And
Hmm.
so when I'll get people that will reach out to me randomly about my podcast, and so I can only imagine people with like super successful ones that are getting every day like just a wave of affirmation. But people will be like, "That episode changed my life." And I'm like,
Sure.
wow, you know? So stuff like that is amazing.
Mm. We've been talking about that over and over for the past an hour and a half, but the last question I will ask you, that's my favorite question to ask all of my guests, and that is, what is the smallest thing you've done? And by small, I don't mean something small. I mean the one thing you've done that has had the greatest, deepest, most profound positive impact in both your life and business. Like, for
the thing
example,
that came to,
for me, it's been
yeah,
starting my podcast because that completely transformed my life.
yeah.
What about you, Misha?
So I'm going to say this, the fortunes in the follow-up, right? And
Mm,
in the last 3 or 4 years, and I learned this in sales, the fortune is in the follow-up. So I was at this high-end mastermind, and this was when I first had the idea about getting customer testimony, video testimonials for people.
mm,
And I stumbled across this lady, and she said, I need that. I'm going to Ireland and I'm doing a mastermind. Maybe you can help me. Reach out to me after this mastermind. Right. And it was in like Mexico, I think. It's a couple of
mm.
years back. And I came home and I was full of self doubt. And I had a list of people to reach out to. And she's very successful at what she did. And I was like, I'm just going to start with her. And I reached out to her and, and she's like, kind of, you know how it is when you reach back out to people and they're like, who are you again? Right. But I told her and she's like, oh my God, I remember. And I can't believe you reached back out to me. I'm going to bring you to Ireland. I'm going to bring you to do this.
Wow.
Right. And that has been this massive, I mean, that was transformational and catapulted me forward. Right.
Hmm.
So like that, yeah, that's like, and it's a small thing. I mean, it's a big thing now, but in the moment, it was really small. Here's a list of 5 people I made contacts with. Start at the top and follow back up with them. And
Sure.
she was the first one I followed back up with, and it just led to amazingness. So tiny, tiny in the moment, but all of a sudden, it was just like grew these legs.
Open the world to you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Listen, Misha, I can talk to you for hour and hour. We've been talking for almost 2 hours. Beautiful. Love what you're doing, your passion, your energy, your drive, everything. But let's wrap this up. We'll definitely do a part three very soon. If someone wants to connect with you, what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, so go to guestingguide.com, download my guesting guide, and you can get on my email list, right? So then you can get, the couple emails I send out a week. If you're like, oh my gosh, I want to join, I want to go on this influence tour, and you already know already after watching our conversation, you can go to badzuck.com, badzuck.com. And then if you're like, then you can follow me on Facebook, Misha Zvagansoff on Facebook. I hang out on Facebook. I'm in and out of Facebook, but and you can always DM me through Facebook. And there's only one Misha Zvagansoff. There
Yeah.
you go.
What a cool name.
Yeah, right.
Seriously, no, listen, absolutely. It's a blast talking to you. I salute you. You're a true leader with heart. Keep shining your light. Keep blessing the world with your presence, your impact, everything you're doing, brother. We're definitely going to be talking soon. Looking forward to part three. And as we say back home in Canada, have a fantabulous evening for you and soon to be weekend for you, brother. I salute you. Take care. Talk
Thank
to you.
you so much, Payman. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to part 3.
Same here. Take care, brother. Cheers.
Cheers.